The Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Mike Tomlin had said after the preseason finale against the Lions, they'll make a decision at the end of the work week. I don't know when the work week ends for the Steelers. I don't know. What are they on extended Labor Day? We're going to take Thursday and Friday off. I haven't seen they're not practicing today or tomorrow, but they have made their decision. And here is Mike Tomlin with the announcement on who the starting quarterback will be for 2024.
I met with both quarterbacks here just a few minutes ago after practice, and I informed them that Russ is QB1 going into week one. It was a difficult decision, but not difficult in a negative way, to be quite honest with you. It was difficult in a positive way. The decision was difficult because of what they're capable of doing. Decision was difficult because of how they have conducted themselves, as opposed to the things that they fall short in terms of capabilities or negative conduct.
How did they handle kind of the news of that you shared with the quarterbacks? Was it a meeting with both of them together, one at a time? How'd that go?
It was with both guys together, and they handled it like professionals.
How much input did Arthur Smith have in this whole process, not just necessarily the decision, but first group reps, things of that nature throughout the summer?
A lot of input, but I don't run away from responsibility. Assistants make suggestions. Guys like me make decisions.
I thought it was interesting how he phrased it. He'll be QB1 going into week one. He didn't say he's the starting quarterback this year. Now, I don't think that means that he could be benched during week one or week two or week three, but he's getting the first crack at proving that he still has that Seahawks magic, that he can turn the clock back to pre-Denver and be the guy that he was on a team that had similar formula to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Seahawks had the great defense. They had the running game. Now, Marshawn Lynch, a little bit more potent than Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, but still, it's the same idea. And Russell Wilson doesn't have to be a hero. He doesn't have to be. See, I think what happened was, and we talked about this a lot at the time, he wanted to go somewhere and be Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. These younger quarterbacks were passing him by and doing more things than he was doing, and that irritated him. And he wanted to become, he thought he could be Mahomes. He thought he could be Josh Allen, and it didn't work in Denver. I think now in Pittsburgh, he's back to being the Russell Wilson, in theory and ideally, that he was in Seattle, where you don't have to do too much, but there will be moments where you have to do something, like that 3rd and 11 play. That was the moment I think he won the job. 3rd and 11 in Detroit. The crowd is as loud as I've ever heard a preseason crowd. Calmly delivers first down pass to George Pickens. They scored a touchdown on that drive. Russell was out, and that's it. He's the starter. One drive, touchdown, big throw on 3rd and 11 in a loud, hostile environment, and he's the starting quarterback. So we'll see what he does, but I think there is something less than a permanent, at least as permanent as it ever is, for the season assignment for Russell Wilson, Charean.
I agree with you. I also don't think this was a competition. I really don't. I mean, because they always said that Russell Wilson was in the pole position from the start. And when they drafted, when they traded for Justin Fields, I'll never forget. I wrote the thing. I'm like, oh, well, apparently Russell Wilson does have competition now. And they immediately said there's no competition. Russell Wilson is the starter. The day they traded for Justin Fields, I think this was predetermined that Russell Wilson was going to be the starter. Look, he didn't even practice for most of training camp with that calf injury, and Justin Fields didn't win the job. Now, if Justin Fields had come out and lit it up and been great in the preseason and great in training camp, then maybe he would have won the job. But I think it was predetermined that Russell Wilson was going to start week one. But I've never thought that was going to be predetermined, that he was going to carry the job the entire season. I think it's a week by week thing, and he's got to be good for him to retain the job week after week after week. And maybe he will. This is certainly, I was going to make the same point, Mike. This is the formula he had in Seattle, a better defense, a really good defense. It matches those Seattle defenses, and a running game that maybe is not quite as good as you said with Marshawn Lynch in Seattle, but it's probably good enough. And it's certainly better than what he had in Denver with that defense. Shoot, look at the Miami game last year with that Denver defense. That Denver defense was awful. So, the Denver defense was terrible and the running game just wasn't there. So this is a much better fit, I think, for Russell Wilson. But he is going to have to play, Mike, and play well each and every week. I agree with you, to keep the job.
70-20 was the week 3 score last year in the Dolphins-Broncos game. 70 points allowed by the Broncos defense. Now, it got better as the season went on, but you can't get much worse than giving up 70 points in a 60-minute football game. Mike Tomlin was asked about Arthur Smith's input. He's the new offensive coordinator who will go back to Atlanta, the place where he was head coach for 3 years before he was fired. That's the week 1 game. What was his input on quarterback? Tomlin said, assistants make suggestions. Guys like me make decisions. Now, I don't know that that means Arthur Smith pounding on the table for Justin Fields. At the end of the day, here's why this makes sense. Wrote about this last night. Talked about it a couple of times this week. I'll summarize it as quickly as possible for anybody who's heard it before. The Steelers' schedule plays out perfectly for Russell Wilson to have 8 games to show what he can do. 3 of the first 6 games against AFC West teams. He knows one of them very well. Broncos in Denver week 2. He knows the Raiders and he knows the Chargers. Raiders week 6, Chargers week 3. And then you've got the kick to end the first half of the season. Cowboys week 5, Sunday Night Football on NBC and Peacock. Jets week 7, Sunday Night Football on NBC and Peacock. At the Giants, Monday Night Football week 8. And then it's your bye week. If they're 3-5 or worse at the bye, that's when you've got a little bit of time to ask yourself, what are we going to do? Are we sticking with Russ? Are we going to Justin Fields? And then, Charean, the last 9 games. Week 10 at the Commanders, that's the easiest it's going to get. All due respect to the Commanders, but look at the rest of it. Look at the 7-game gauntlet to end the season, the meat grinder. Ravens, Browns, Bengals, Browns, Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs, Bengals. Holy crap, it's enough to make you want to go hide under your bed. So they'll know after 8 weeks who the best guy is to help them deal with that murderer's row that is looming from week 11 all the way through until the end of the season. And be glad, Steelers fans, that you get Browns, Bengals, Ravens later. People complain about that, and I still don't understand it. You don't want them week 1, 2, and 3. You want them week 11, 12, and 13.
Well, Mike, the Steelers' ability to continue to be quote-unquote contenders, but they have had a winning record every year since 2003 when they went 6-10. And as you pointed out, 1999 was the last time they finished last in the division.
88.
99, they were 6-10.
Even longer.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
They still weren't last
I'm pretty
in the
sure
division.
99 they were 6-10, but
they still weren't last in the division. Look at 1999 had 6 teams in the division, and like the Bengals were floating around and they were horrible then.
Okay,
they weren't
right.
last.
You're right. 88. So 88 was the last time they were in the division. So 99 they were 4th in the division. But 2016, Mike, is the last time they won a playoff game. So this is a team that's been good enough to contend for playoff spots, get into the playoffs. They just haven't been able to win a playoff game in recent years. So that's what they're aiming for, is to get into the playoffs and be good enough to win a playoff game. And then once you win one playoff game, you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to do more. And that's what they haven't done. So that's what they're looking for from Russell Wilson. And he has a history of doing it. Justin Fields doesn't have that history of doing that, at least not yet. He hasn't played it long enough in the NFL, 10-28 as a starter. So this to me makes sense to start the season with what your goals are with Russell Wilson as your starter. If he fails, they have Justin Fields there. But, as John Madden once said, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. So we'll see if this works out for him, but they're hoping that Russell Wilson is the guy.
And, it's funny. At one point last week, Patrick Mahomes made the comment that if NIL was around when he was in college, he might have stayed another year at Texas Tech. And what an alternate universe that sets up in the NFL if he enters the draft in 2018 instead of 2017. But you mentioned the last time the Steelers won a playoff game, 2016. That was in Kansas City, a game that was delayed from afternoon to evening because of an ice storm. That was the game because the Steelers went there and won. That was the last game the Chiefs played before they decided We love Alex Smith, but there's a limit to how far he's going to take us. We need a quarterback who's going to take us. So blame the Steelers for the Chiefs having Patrick Mahomes. They can blame themselves when they play Patrick Mahomes later this year on Christmas Day and maybe have to encounter him in the postseason. But here's the reality. We saw a Steelers-Chiefs playoff game a few years ago. And this is something Chris always says. He doesn't like that the Steelers make it to the playoffs because they aren't good enough to advance. Let's only have teams that get there that are good enough to win when they get there. And the Steelers haven't had the quarterback play since Father Time started to catch up to Ben Roethlisberger, as evidenced by the fact that it's now 8 years since they won a playoff game. The way this schedule plays out in the regular season, the way Mike Tomlin makes the team better as the season unfolds, if they can win enough games to qualify after that 7-game gauntlet to end the regular season, between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, whoever's starting then, they're going to be in better position than they've been in years since 2016. Because really, I mean, Ben Roethlisberger probably gets to the Hall of Fame. Great Steelers player when you look at the full body of work. But the last few years were a little rough. And the last year, they really didn't want him to come back. They made him an offer that they thought he'd refuse, and he accepted it. And they're like, oh, crap, now we got to bring him back for another year. So it hasn't been the same at the quarterback position really since 2016. They'll have something better. I mean, look at, and it's so many people out there are negative about Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Those guys are better than what the Steelers had last year. Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph. Wilson and Fields are a significant upgrade over that trio of options the Steelers had, and they still got to the playoffs.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Mike. I agree with you. It is an upgrade on what they had last year. Now, these may not be their quarterbacks next year, and that's, going forward, they may have a totally different quarterback, and that's been part of the problem, Mike. They've been
might be Dak next year.
It could be, but they've been good enough with the winning record that they haven't had that high draft pick. So when it's come to drafting a quarterback, they haven't had the high pick to take the really good quarterback. It's been Kenny Pickett and whoever else, and they haven't had that option of getting that really good quarterback. So that's the problem. You almost wish your team, if you don't have a quarterback, is really bad. So you get that high pick, and you get to rebuild your team with a young quarterback who you can build around for years, and they haven't had that. So they keep drafting quarterbacks and training for quarterbacks and signing quarterbacks since Ben Roethlisberger left to try to find that guy. And that usually doesn't work for you. And it especially doesn't work long-term for you. It worked obviously for the Bucs in a short period of time with Tom Brady, but usually over a long period of time, that kind of process of finding a quarterback just doesn't work. But problem is they haven't been high enough to draft a good one.
And they thought they had that guy in Kenny Pickett, and they realized, to their credit, they realized and they acted on the conclusion that this guy isn't it. That's very un-Steelers to do that. What they've done this offseason by completely getting rid of their entire quarterback depth chart and signing Russell Wilson and trading for Justin Fields, that's something the Steelers don't do, which creates a level of interest and intrigue and excitement for a team that seems to be deviating significantly from its usual modus operandi. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.